Hey, what's your name? What's your podcast name? You want to make sure that's something memorable so everybody remembers. Here's how. So you've got a great idea for a podcast, but you're like, you know what? I just don't know what to call it, what to name it. And that is actually super important because you know what? You wouldn't be here if you were watching The Kim Parkinson Show because you don't even know who I am. Well, hopefully you do now, but you really don't know me by my name, right? You know me maybe by my glasses, you know me maybe by my equipment, maybe you know me because I'm always staring off into the wrong spot on the camera. Or maybe you know me because we're Facebook friends, we're on a group, whatever. But here's the thing. If I was to tell you what my podcast name was and it was my name, what is that going to be about? Have any idea? Not everybody knows what you do unless you are somebody super powerful and super important. You may get somebody up there to have a really great idea and put their name up there, right? Like the Mel Robbins Show. Yeah, we all know who she is. So you want a podcast that's memorable. You want a podcast name that specifically talks about who you are, what you are going to talk about, and who your niche is. Yeah, I know. That's like 3 different things you need to put in one name. And that's really hard to do. Coming up with something that's uniquely you, that comes up with something that is uniquely talking about your subject and that uniquely talks to your clients, customers, listeners, can be tiresome and daunting. But let me tell you, you are going to want to make sure that you research your keywords and then throw all those keywords into one big word jumble and see what you come up with. Now, in this particular case, I actually have thrown in a bunch of different keywords and just asked ChatGPT, what is that? What can you come up with for a couple of podcast names? Now, it never comes up with something identical to what I want to use, but maybe it comes up with different synonyms or antonyms that you may be like, yeah, I want to use those. And that's actually what we're looking for here, right? We're looking for those like really special words that are going to resonate with our listeners, with our story, and with our brand. So, like unstoppable, or in my case, creative, because if you know anything about me, I've owned a lot of different businesses and they're all creative. One of them being a craft store. So yeah, creative is in my DNA. So having a creative podcasting agency just made it nice and simple for me. So let's talk about when you find that name. When you come up with that name and you're like, that is the name. I want to make sure that I have that name. Now, what's the next step that you do? Definitely do some research on that name. You don't want that name to already be out there because you may have competition or maybe they've trademarked the name and you want to make sure that you're the one that's standing out in the crowd by yourself. So my suggestion to you, go to Apple, go to Spotify, go to Google Podcasts and do a search on exactly that name you've come up with. Just make sure that it's not already out there. Do a Google search or a Yahoo, Bing, whatever type of search you want to do on the actual name itself with the word podcast and without the word podcast. Just do a couple of different searches. It's not going to take you a whole lot of time. It might take you like 10 minutes of your time to actually go ahead and do all of that. But a lot of peace of mind knowing that you've come up with something kind of unique and something definitely memorable and interesting that people are going to want to listen to. Now, after you have done some of that research, my then suggestion, if you have the means, maybe you might want to purchase that domain. That could be controversial. You may or may not want to, okay? That's totally up to you. Is it going to trademark it for you? No. Is it going to just give you a little bit more authority? Yes. Does it actually do anything as far as, what you might be doing with it? You could do a redirect to your own website in the event then somebody could say, hey, the creative podcasting goes to KB Creative Media. You're going to want to make sure that you have that name as much as you can. So go ahead and grab all the socials for that name. That means Facebook, that's YouTube, that is Instagram, that's Pinterest, anything and everything you think that you're going to want to use for that name, you're going to want to make sure you go to all those socials and grab it. I have seen clients say, oh my gosh, that name was taken at Instagram, and so I have to come up with a totally different name. If it's not a podcast, and if it's maybe available on Facebook but not on Instagram, make your Instagram just slightly different by adding the word podcast to it. Or alternatively, do the blah, blah, blah podcast. Why not? Absolutely a great way to be able to do that. And if it's not a podcast, it's not going to be up there. So you're definitely going to be able to scrape that and grab that for yourself. You've come up with your podcast name. It is amazing. It's not taken by any other podcast. You've gone ahead and grabbed that domain just in the off chance, and then you've asked your web designer to go redirect it to your website. And then you have also done all of your socials and grabbed all of those, right? Here's the thing. You may never use them, but you have them. And so then in the event that somebody says, hey, I started a podcast and my podcast name is yada, and I had this. And you can say, really? Because I've owned all the socials since this particular date. And I started my podcast on this particular date. So just, for peace of mind, I do suggest going and grabbing those socials for that and just going and grabbing any kind of domain if you want. Again, it's just a precaution so that somebody else doesn't actually take your name. Then when you do that, after it's completed, you're going to obviously go sign up with a host, then add your name right into the host. Once that is created and you've created a trailer, you'll then have an RSS feed that is unique to your name. Now, if you do not already have a podcast trailer up there and you're like, you know what, I am not quite ready to release this, but I want to secure this name, you want to make sure that you create that trailer and put that trailer out to the world. And here's why. You then create that authority that this is the date you started that podcast. Just giving the world a little bit of, hey, I'm here, I'm not quite ready yet, but I'm securing my name. Now, what happens if you've done a little search and you come up with a name and you absolutely love it, and it's taken? You've looked it up on Apple and somebody has a podcast named that, and say they released 4 videos 3.5 years ago when they haven't done anything else. Maybe then go ahead and grab all those socials and domain and go ahead with that name, because if they already have that and they've only created a couple of episodes, they may have pod faded. Here's the thing with pod fading. I'll do a whole episode on it, but I'm not even sure why people go ahead and release a couple of episodes and then continue to pay the host over and over again for years, even though they're not coming out with another episode. So I have no idea. Maybe it's free on Spotify for podcasters or something. You have to pay for your hosting in order for that to then stay up. If they have been doing this 3.5 years ago, they only came out with 4 episodes at that time, maybe do a little Google search and see if they're still in the business of whatever it is. And also take a listen to their episodes and just check out to make sure that maybe they're not actually talking about the same topic you are. And if that's the case, make sure you set yourself a really diligent and consistent schedule to get episodes out weekly and get episodes out in numbers so that you can actually then create the authority over that name. You may want to check to make sure that they haven't grabbed the domain and all of those socials, because if they have, then maybe they've trademarked it and maybe they want to continue to use it. And last but not least, if you really are strongly feeling about this particular name and you're really worried about it, reach out to the host, see if they reply back. Just tell them you'd like to use that name too, and are they planning on releasing new episodes? chances are they'll reply and they'll be like, no, or they won't reply at all. And then you can maybe take that as a no as well. You just never know. So check with those if you want to, and also check again, all their socials, the domain, all of that, and make sure that if that's available. Now, where would you check for that? So you see Apple has it. A couple of other places to check is like pod.link. You want to do that, or podnews.net. You want to check that one just to make sure that those are up there. You could also check Chartable to see if maybe they're actually ranked at all. If they've ranked, maybe then it's not a good idea to take that name. So kind of give yourself an idea on that one. All right, so you've got your name. It's memorable. It has something to do with your niche. It's going to reach out to those listeners. You've checked on Apple, Google, Spotify. It's not taken. You have then grabbed the domain. You've grabbed all the socials. You've actually recorded your trailer, put it up, and created an RSS feed. Now you're ready. You're ready to get out there and put that podcast out into the world. If you have done that, I would love to know. Please list me down below and let me know if you have released a new podcast, and I would love to take a listen. So until next time, thank you and see you soon. Bye-bye.